I've been behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler for damn near 15 years now, crisscrossing the heartland from the flatlands of Kansas to the rolling hills creeping toward the Appalachians. It's a lonely life, sure, but there's a rhythm to it. The hum of the diesel engine, the white lines blurring under your tires, the endless stretch of road that makes you feel like you're the only soul left in the world. I've seen my share of strange things out there. Deer eyes glowing like embers in the headlights, fog banks that swallow semis whole, even the occasional hitchhiker who vanishes when you glance away. But nothing, and I mean nothing, comes close to what happened on that Deadhead run back from Wichita last fall. It was the kind of trip that should have been forgettable. Empty trailer, light load, just me and the open highway aiming for Omaha to pick up a fresh haul. Easy money, or so I thought. But some roads, they don't let you pass without taking a piece of you. It started innocent enough. I dropped off a load of machinery at a warehouse on the outskirts of Wichita around dusk. The sky was already bruising purple, and a chill wind was kicking up dust devils across the parking lot. Late October, you know the type, leaves stripped bare from the trees, air sharp enough to cut your lungs. I fueled up at a truck stop, grabbed a thermos of black coffee that tasted like burnt rubber, and hit the interstate heading north. The plan was to make Omaha by morning, crash at a motel, and reload. No rush, no deadlines breathing down my neck. That's the beauty of a deadhead. No cargo means no worries. Or at least, that's how it's supposed to be. The first few hours ticked by without incident. Traffic thinned out as night fell, leaving me alone with the CB radio crackling static and the occasional burst from other drivers swapping stories about bad weather up ahead. I kept the heater on low, the cab warm against the dropping temperature outside. My mind wandered, as it does on long hauls, to the life I'd pieced together out here. Divorced twice, kids I barely see, a string of regrets that pile up like unpaid tolls. There was one in particular that always nagged at me, the accident back in 12. I'd been running late on a delivery through Missouri, pushed the rig too hard around a bend, and clipped a sedan. The driver walked away, but his passenger, well, she didn't. I never fessed up to nodding off at the wheel, blamed it on black ice. The insurance sorted it, but the guilt? That stuck like tar. Around midnight, things started to shift. My GPS, this reliable old Garmin I'd had for years, beeped a route recalculation. Said there was construction on I-35, suggested a detour onto some state road. I didn't think much of it. Detours happen. So I took the exit, tires rumbling over the ramp onto a Tulane blacktop that cut through what looked like endless farmland. No lights, no houses, just fields of stubble waving in the wind under a sky so dark it felt like a void. The moon was new, hidden away, and the stars were blotted out by clouds. The road was cracked, potholes jarring the cab every few miles, but I figured it'd link back up soon enough. That's when the cold seeped in. Not the usual draft from a bad seal. The heater was blasting full, but the air turned frigid like I'd rolled down the windows in a blizzard. I cranked it higher, rubbed my hands together, but it didn't help. Goose flesh prickled up my arms, and I felt this heaviness in the cab, like someone had climbed in without me noticing. I glanced at the passenger seat, empty, of course. Shook it off as fatigue. Long-haul drivers know the tricks your mind plays after hours of staring at the dash lights. Then the radio kicked in. I had it tuned to an AM station out of Salina, playing old country tunes to keep me company, but it faded to static as the signal dropped. Normal enough in the sticks. But through the white noise, I caught something, faint murmurs like voices underwater. At first, I thought it was bleed from another channel, maybe truckers on the CB. I fiddled with the dial, but persisted, growing clearer bit by bit. Words started forming, names I recognized, dates that hit like punches. Emily, March 17th, 2012. Why didn't you stop? My stomach twisted. Emily. That was the name of the woman in that sedan. The one I'd killed. No, not killed. Accident, I told myself. But the whispers didn't care about excuses. They droned on, listing regrets like a ledger. The time I walked out on my first wife during her chemo, the son I hadn't called in years, the shortcuts I'd taken that cost buddies their licenses. I slammed the radio off, heart thumping against my ribs. Silence flooded the cab, thick and oppressive. But the whispers didn't stop. They echoed in my head now, or maybe from the sleeper berth behind me. I pulled over to the shoulder, gravel crunching under the tires, and killed the engine. Stepped out into the night, the wind howling like a distant wail through the fields. No cars, no lights on the horizon. Just me, the truck, and that endless gray road. I checked the berth, empty as expected, climbed back in, started her up, and kept going. But the rig felt off now, sluggish, like it was dragging something heavy despite the empty trailer. The steering pulled right toward the ditch, forcing me to white-knuckle the wheel to stay straight. Miles dragged on, the road unchanging. No mile markers, no signs welcoming me to the next county. Just the same barren landscape repeating like a bad dream. The whispers swelled again, not just in the radio, but in the wind rushing past the windows and the engine's rumble. They weren't angry. They were pleading, voices overlapping in desperation. "Let us out. It hurts. You know what you did?" I screamed at them to shut up, but my voice cracked, echoing back hollow in the cab. Up ahead, a shape loomed in the headlights. An old way station, abandoned by the looks of it. Rusted scales, chain-link fence sagging, windows boarded up. I don't know why I stopped. Maybe I thought a break would clear my head. Pulled onto the cracked concrete pad, the truck settling with a groan. The scales creaked under the weight, needles twitching on the dials even though I was empty. Should have read 0, but they climbed. 10,000 pounds, 20,000, like phantom cargo was piling on. I sat there, engine idling, staring into the side mirrors. That's when I saw them. Shadows just at the edge of the reflection, tall, indistinct figures standing behind the trailer, out of direct sight. If I turned my head, they vanished, but in the glass, they lingered, shifting closer. One reached out, a handprint smearing the mirror from the inside. The whispers turned to cries now, begging for release, naming sins I'd long buried. "You left us, pay the mile." Panic clawed up my throat. I threw the truck into gear and floored it, tires spinning before catching. The road ahead looked the same. Twisted trees I swore I'd passed before, their branches like skeletal fingers scratching the sky. I pushed the speedometer to 70, 80, but the landscape looped. Same fence post, same faded billboard for a long-gone diner. Hours blurred, or was it minutes? The fuel gauge dipped unnaturally fast, as if the truck was feeding on something else. The figures in the mirrors multiplied, crowding the edges, their forms sharpening into faces I recognized. Emily, pale and accusing. My ex-wife, eyes hollow, friends I'd betrayed. They pressed against the glass, mouths moving in silent pleas. Dawn finally cracked the horizon, a thin line of gray light bleeding through the clouds. As the sun rose, the loop broke, the road straightened, signs appeared, and I merged back onto I-35 like nothing had happened. The whispers faded to a murmur, then nothing. I made Omaha by noon, shaking so bad I could barely sign the paperwork for the new load. That was over a year ago now. I still drive, but never Deadhead alone. I team up with a partner, keep the cab lit, the radio blasting anything but static. But in quiet moments, lying in the berth or staring at an empty stretch of highway, those voices creep back. Faint, like wind through cracks, listing regrets I can't outrun. Some emptiness, it pulls in the darkness you carry. And hell, it pays by the mile, one whispered sin at a time. I wonder how many more I got left before the scales tip for good. I've been turning wrenches and wheels on big rigs for over 20 years now, hauling everything from coal to lumber through the twisting backroads of Appalachia. It's a life that hardens you. Long nights where the only company is the drone of your engine and the shadows of the mountains closing in like old grudges. You learn to embrace the isolation or it breaks you. But there's one run I can't shake, a deadhead from the hollers near Elkins, West Virginia, aiming empty toward Lexington, Kentucky. It was midsummer, the air thick with humidity that clings to your skin like regret, even after the sun dips behind the ridges. Heat rises off the asphalt in waves, distorting the road ahead, and the stars hang low, almost judgmental, piercing through the canopy of oaks and pines that crowd the highway. I just unloaded a shipment of timber and Elkins, the kind of drop-off where the locals at you like an outsider, and I figured the empty trailer would make for fast miles and a fat paycheck. No load means no worries, right? But some nights, the emptiness invites things you'd rather leave buried. The drive started routine enough. I pulled out around dusk, the cab still warm from the day's sun, and wound my way onto Route 33, that snaking two-laner that cuts through the Monongahela National Forest. Trees pressed close on both sides, their branches arching over like a tunnel, filtering the fading light into speckled patterns on the dash. I had the windows cracked for the breeze, carrying the scent of pine sap and damp earth, mixed with the faint rot of fallen leaves. The CB was quiet. No chatter from other drivers, just the occasional static pop. I sipped lukewarm coffee from a thermos, my mind drifting to the life I'd patched together out here. 2 decades of trucking had cost me plenty, a marriage that crumbled under the weight of absent nights, kids who grew up calling me by my first name, friends I'd let down with shortcuts that seemed smart at the time but left them high and dry. There was one shortcut in particular that gnawed at me. The time I fudged logbooks to beat a deadline, pushing a buddy to do the same, only for him to wrap his rig around a guardrail in a fog-shrouded pass. He survived, barely, but the blame stuck to me like mud on boots, even if I never admitted it. Around 2 a.m., the road felt different. The mile markers, those reflective posts that tick off your progress, started glitching in my headlights. 85, then 85 again, like the ground was folding back on itself. I rubbed my eyes, blaming the heat haze or maybe a trick of the moonlight filtering through the leaves. No other vehicles had passed in hours. Just me, the hum of tires on cracked pavement, and the endless blacktop vanishing into the dark folds of the hills. The forest loomed denser here, ancient hardwoods twisting up from rocky soil, their roots buckling the shoulder in places. Crickets chirped in a steady rhythm, but underneath it, a low hum vibrated through the cab, syncing with my pulse. My thoughts turned inward, unbidden, to those old mistakes. The family I'd abandoned for the road, chasing paychecks that never filled the void. The shortcuts, oh, those damn shortcuts that cost jobs, trust lives almost. It was like the isolation amplified them, whispering accusations in the wind rushing past. Then the CB sparked to life, not with voices but breathing. Heavy, ragged inhales and exhales, mirroring my own so perfectly it sent a chill down my sweat-damp back. I grabbed the mic, keyed it up. Breaker, breaker, anyone out there? Nothing but that breathing, growing deeper, as if whatever was on the other end was drawing closer. I spotted a pull-off ahead, a desolate rest area tucked into a clearing, the kind with rusted picnic tables and overgrown weeds choking the lot. No facilities, just a gravel patch ringed by trees that seemed to lean in listening. Tire tracks scarred the ground, fresh-looking, but they trailed off into the underbrush, leading nowhere. I eased the rig in, killed the engine, and stepped out. The air hit me thick, heavier than the humidity should allow, carrying a faint whiff of sulfur like struck matches or something decaying deep in the soil. The heat pressed down, but a cool draft snaked from the woods, rustling leaves in a way that sounded almost like footsteps padding softly behind me. I stretched my legs, walking around the trailer to shake off the unease. The metal was warm to the touch, but in the side mirrors, shadows danced, elongated figures that aped my movements, stretching a second too long before snapping back. I spun around, nothing but empty lot and the wall of forest. The breathing echoed now, not from the CB, but from everywhere. The trees, the ground, the air itself. It synced with mine again, but off by a beat, like an echo anticipating my next breath. Panic bubbled up slow, a knot in my gut. I climbed back into the cab, turned the key. Click. Nothing. The starter whined, but the engine stayed dead, as if something had drained it dry. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. I tried the key again and again, sweat beading on my forehead, mixing with the humid night. The sulfur smell intensified, seeping through the vents, making my eyes water. In the rear view, those shadows coalesced, not quite human, but suggesting forms, tall, hunched, mimicking my frantic motions with a lag that mocked me. The breathing loudened closer, as if whatever it was had slipped into the sleeper berth, inches from my neck. I could feel a presence, heavy and judging, pressing on my chest like the weight of all those wrong turns I'd taken. "What do you want?" I muttered, voice cracking. No answer, just that ragged inhale, exhale, drawing out my regrets like poison from a wound. Finally, after pounding the dash and cursing every god I knew, the engine roared to life. I slammed into gear, gravel spraying as I peeled out. The road ahead looped the same. Mile marker 85 flickering in the headlights. Over and over, the forest blurring into a green-black smear. Trees crowded closer, branches scraping the roof like fingers grasping. The stars above seemed to pulse, watching as the breathing faded to a whisper, murmuring names, dates, failures I'd buried in the back of my mind. Sunrise crept over the ridges, painting the sky in pale gold. And just like that, the loop broke. Marker 86 appeared, then 87, the road straightening into familiar curves toward Lexington. I made it by mid-morning, hands still trembling on the wheel, but the world snapped back to normal. Birds singing, distant traffic humming. That was 3 years ago. I still drive these mountain routes, but I avoid deadheads when I can, team up with a partner to fill the silence. Yet on hot summer nights, when the air thickens and the mile markers blur, that breathing returns, a faint rasp in the wind, syncing with my own. It feels like judgment, tallying every shortcut, every abandonment, paying out in miles that never end. I wonder how many more loops I've got before it pulls me in for good, leaving me to wander those forgotten stretches alone. I've been logging miles as a long-haul trucker for close to 25 years, weaving through the spine of the Appalachians from the coal fields of Kentucky to the steel towns up in Pennsylvania. It's a grind that wears on you. The endless switchbacks climbing over ridges, the way the mountains seem to huddle closer at night, whispering through the pines like they've got secrets they're not keen on sharing. You get used to the isolation, or at least you tell yourself you do, with nothing but the rumble of the diesel and the faint glow of the dash lights to keep the darkness at bay. But there's one deadhead run I took last winter that still claws at me. Empty haul from Altoona back down to Beckley, West Virginia, after dropping a load of machinery. It was the kind of trip that promised easy pay. No cargo to babysit, just me and the open road, aiming to make it home before the next storm rolled in. Weeks on the circuit had me bone-tired, dreaming of my own bed and a hot meal that didn't come from a truck stop microwave. Little did I know, some emptiness carries its own weight, and that night, it felt like I was towing my whole damn life behind me. The drop-off in Altoona went smooth enough. It was early evening, the sky already heavy with that leaden gray that heralds snow in the highlands. Flurries danced in the warehouse floodlights as I unhitched the trailer, signed the papers with numb fingers, and climbed back into the cab. The air bit sharp, carrying the metallic tang of impending weather mixed with the evergreen scent from the surrounding hills. I fueled up at a mom-and-pop station on the edge of town, grabbed a thermos of coffee that steamed up the windows, and pointed the rig south on Route 219, that winding ribbon that snakes through the Alleghenies. The road was familiar, steep grades, hairpin turns, guardrails pitted from years of rock slides. Traffic was light. Most folks had sense enough to hunker down before the fog settled in. I kept the heater cranked, the cab a cocoon against the dropping temps, and tuned the radio to a staticky country station out of Johnstown, songs about lost love and hard living that hit a little too close. As night deepened, the fog rolled in like smoke from a distant fire, blanketing the passes and turning my high beams into useless glows that bounced back at me. It wasn't the usual mountain mist. This felt thicker, almost deliberate, swallowing road signs and reflectors until the world narrowed to a hazy tunnel just beyond the hood. The truck handled fine at first, light and responsive with no load, but around midnight, something shifted. A groan echoed from the chassis, low and protesting, like the axles were straining under extra weight. I eased off the gas, listening, but the only sound was the tires hissing on the damp pavement and the wind moaning through the gaps in the door seals. Fatigue crept in then, the kind that tugs at your eyelids and dredges up things you'd rather leave buried. My mind wandered to the messes I'd made over the years, the lies I'd spun to my wife about late nights that weren't always about deliveries, the kid from a one-night stand in Knoxville that I never acknowledged, letters unopened in a drawer back home. Guilt like that festers in the quiet, and out here with the mountains pressing in, it felt amplified, echoing in my skull. The groans grew intermittent, but the rig started pulling, subtle at first, like an invisible hand nudging the wheel toward the shoulder. I corrected, chalking it up to wind or uneven road, but the unease settled in my gut, a cold knot that no amount of coffee could warm. No other lights pierced the fog. No oncoming trucks, no distant porch glows from hidden cabins tucked in the hollows. Just me, alone in this muted world where the trees loomed as vague shapes, their branches skeletal against the gray. I cracked the window for fresh air, but it only let in more chill, laced with the damp rot of leaf litter and something sharper, like ozone after a lightning strike. That's when the thumps started, soft, rhythmic, coming from the empty trailer behind me. At first, I thought it was debris shifting, maybe a loose chain rattling, but it persisted, paced like footsteps echoing in the hollow space. Thump, thump, deliberate, measuring the length of the box. I tried ignoring it, turning up the radio, but the station had faded to white noise, punctuated by faint pops that almost sounded like words forming just out of reach. The thumps grew clearer, syncing with my heartbeat, and that guilt surged back. Visions of my wife's tear-streaked face during our last fight, the anonymous letters about the kid I'd ignored, piling up like unpaid debts. The road climbed higher into the pass, the fog so dense now that I crawled at 30 miles per hour, peering into the void. The truck groaned again, louder, as if buckling under a phantom payload, and I felt the cab dip slightly, like something heavy had settled in. Panic flickered, but I pushed it down. Truckers don't spook easy. Up ahead, a pullout emerged from the mist. A gravel turnout carved into the hillside, the kind with a rusted chain across an old logging trail, overlooked by the highway department. I eased in, tires crunching over loose stones, and killed the engine. The silence hit like a wall, absolute and deafening, broken only by the tick of cooling metal and the distant drip of condensation from the trees. The thump stopped, but now came footsteps, crisp, circling outside the rig, gravel shifting under unseen boots. I froze, straining to listen, my breath fogging the glass. No one out there. The fog shrouded everything beyond a few feet. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove box, its beam cutting a weak path through the haze, illuminating swirling vapors, but nothing solid. The footsteps paused, then resumed, closer, padding around the trailer. Heart pounding, I stepped out, boots hitting the ground with a crunch that echoed too loud. The air was stifling despite the cold, thick with that ozone scent, making it hard to draw a full breath. I walked the length of the truck, lights sweeping, but the footsteps always seemed just behind me, out of sight. Back at the cab, I checked the mirrors. Smudges appeared on the glass, faint at first, then sharpening into handprints, one by one, as if invisible fingers pressed from the other side. Not smears from dirt. These were deliberate, palms flat, fingers splayed, multiplying across the reflective surfaces. I wiped at one with my sleeve, but it stayed, cold to the touch. The air grew heavier, charged, and then came the whispers, an echo of my own voice, faint and wavering, confessing secrets I'd never uttered aloud. I lied to her every night away. The boy in Knoxville, he's mine. I knew and did nothing. It slithered from the vents, the radio, the wind itself, wrapping around me like vines. Terror gripped my chest, squeezing as the truck lurched. Engine roaring to life on its own, headlights flaring into the fog. The wheels spun, gravel spraying, and the rig surged forward, accelerating toward the edge where the pullout dropped into a ravine I couldn't see. I lunged for the cab, yanking the door open and diving in as the truck picked up speed. Slammed my foot on the brake, but it sank uselessly, pedals dead. The whispers swelled, my voice accusing, listing every betrayal. every shortcut that hurt others. The fog parted just enough to reveal the drop-off rushing up, a black void beyond the guardrail, rocks tumbling into nothingness. I pumped the brakes again, yanked the emergency, screaming curses that drowned in the echoes. At the last second, the rig shuddered, brakes catching with a screech, halting inches from the edge. The engine stalled, whispers fading to a murmur, then silence. The fog lifted slowly, tendrils retreating up the slopes, revealing the road ahead clear under a sliver of moon. I sat there, shaking, sweat freezing on my skin, before restarting and creeping down the pass. Made Beckley by dawn, the world snapping back to normal, gas stations buzzing, folks oblivious to the night. I hugged my wife tighter that day, called a kid for the first time, but the words stuck in my throat, confessions half-formed. Years later, I still haul through those mountains, but never empty in winter fog. The groans return in dreams, the handprints smear my mirrors in memory, and that whispering voice, mine but not, lingers in quiet moments, tallying what I owe. Hell charges by the mile, they say, and out here in the hollows, the debt never quite settles. I wonder how long before it pulls me over the edge for good.